Every proposal failed the alien princess Part 1. Princess stood on the crystalline balcony of her tower, watching another rejected suitor's ship disappear into the purple clouds of Prime. The prince's vessel sparked with angry lightning as it departed, his diplomatic escort probably explaining how the princess had politely but firmly declined his marriage proposal. That made it 47 rejections this cycle. Her forearms crossed in frustration as she watched the ship vanish. Behind her, the soft chiming of her advisor's approach echoed through the chamber. "Your Highness," came the melodic voice of Keeper Thane, her oldest friend and confidant. "The council grows restless. They say the people need stability, need an alliance through marriage." Silver skin shimmered with barely contained emotion. "They need me to be strong, Thane, not sold off like cargo to whoever offers the best trade agreement." She turned, her violet eyes reflecting the twin moons rising over their world. "Every prince, every emperor's son, every noble who comes here sees only what I can give them: territory, resources, military might." Thane approached carefully, his own scaled features softening with understanding. "Perhaps that is how politics works, Princess. Your people have prospered under such arrangements for generations." "Have they?" Moved to the great window that overlooked the capital city. Below, millions went about their evening routines, their bioluminescent markings creating a galaxy of lights in the growing darkness. "We trade our daughters to prevent wars that might never come. We bow to stronger empires to avoid conflicts we might win if we stood together." The princess had been raised to believe in the old ways, the careful balance of alliances that kept Prime safe in a dangerous galaxy. Her mother, the queen, had married for politics. Her grandmother before her had done the same, but had spent years studying in the great libraries, learning about worlds where beings chose their own paths, where strength came from within rather than from whom you married. The prince seemed adequate, Thane offered weakly. "He spent 3 hours explaining how my world's gravity wells could improve his empire's shipping routes," said flatly. "He never once asked what I thought about anything, not my interests, my hopes, my dreams for my people. To him, I was a useful resource with decorative qualities." A soft alert chimed from the palace communication system. Thane checked the display, his expression puzzling. "Your Highness, there's an unknown vessel requesting permission to land. It's small, very small compared to the usual diplomatic ships." "Another suitor," sighed. "At least this one will be brief. Small ships usually mean small empires with small offers." Actually, the ship identifies itself as human. Paused. She had heard of humans, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had by now. They were the newcomers, the strange bipedal species that had somehow survived first contact with a dozen different civilizations without being conquered or destroyed. Most species needed centuries to develop the technology for interstellar travel, but humans had gone from primitive chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in barely 2 centuries. Human, she had never seen one in person. They're not part of any major empire. What could they possibly want? "The pilot requests an audience with you personally. He says he's not here about politics or trade. He says he's here because he heard you've been saying no to everyone and he wanted to know why." For the first time in weeks, felt genuinely curious. "He wants to know why I've been rejecting proposals." "That's what he said, Your Highness." "Well, that's certainly different." She moved toward her chambers. "I suppose I should change into something more formal." "Actually," Thane said, consulting his display again, "he specifically requested that you don't. He says he'd prefer to meet you as you are, not as a princess putting on a show." Stopped walking. In all her years of receiving suitors, not one had ever suggested she shouldn't dress up for them. Most demanded she wear her finest gowns and most impressive jewelry. "That's unusual." "Humans are known to be unusual, Your Highness." She found herself smiling for the first time in days. "Very well. Have him brought to the small receiving chamber, not the throne room. And Thane, don't announce him with all the usual ceremony. I want to see what he does when he's not being watched by half the court." 20 minutes later, waited in the simple but elegant chamber she used for private meetings. Through the windows, she could see a small, sleek ship settling onto the landing platform. It was barely larger than a personal transport, nothing like the massive diplomatic vessels that usually brought her suitors. The doors opened, and Thane entered, followed by the human. His first impression was of someone completely out of place in her formal palace, yet somehow perfectly comfortable with himself. He was tall for his species, She had red, with dark hair and brown skin that spoke of a world with a strong sun. He wore simple clothes, clean but practical, nothing like the elaborate uniforms and ceremonial robes her other visitors favored. "Your Highness," Thane began formally, "may I present?" The human said, stepping forward with a slight bow that was respectful but not subservient. "Thank you for agreeing to see me, Princess." "Mister," she replied, studying his face. There was intelligence there and something else she couldn't quite identify. "I must admit your request for an audience was unique. You're not here to propose marriage." "God, no," laughed, and the sound was genuine and warm. "I mean no offense, Your Highness, but I barely know you. Proposing to someone you've never had a conversation with seems insane." Blinked, the casual way he spoke to her, the easy laugh, the complete absence of fear or calculation in his manner, it was like nothing she had experienced. "Then why are you here?" "Curiosity, mostly," said honestly. "Word has gotten around the galaxy that the most sought-after princess in known space has turned down every marriage proposal for the past 2 years. As someone who comes from a culture where people choose their own partners, I was curious about what kind of person would stand up to that kind of pressure." "And what have you concluded?" she asked, genuinely interested in his answer. "That you're either the most sensible person in the galaxy or you're holding out for something specific," said. "Mind if I ask which it is?" Found herself laughing, the first real laugh she had experienced in months. "Perhaps both. Please sit down, mister. I find myself curious about humans as well." They settled into comfortable chairs near the window, glanced around the chamber, taking in the elegant architecture and the view of the city beyond. "This is beautiful," he said. "The whole planet is incredible. The way your cities work with the natural bioluminescence instead of fighting it, it's like living art." "You appreciate our architecture?" "I'm an engineer by training," explained. "When I'm not flying around the galaxy asking princesses awkward questions, I design habitats for extreme environments. Your people's integration of natural and artificial systems is amazing. The way you've maintained ecological balance while supporting a technological civilization, we're still trying to figure that out on most human worlds." Leaned forward, intrigued. This was the first time any visitor had shown genuine interest in society rather than just its resources. "What kind of extreme environments?" "Gas giant atmospheres, mostly. But I've also worked on underwater cities and high radiation zones. The challenge is always the same. How do you create a space where people can thrive without destroying what makes the environment special in the first place?" "That's exactly the challenge my people face," said, excitement creeping into her voice. "How do we maintain our independence and our way of life while being strong enough to survive in a galaxy full of aggressive empires?" "Is that why you've been turning down marriage proposals? Because they all want to change how your people live?" "Among other reasons," she said carefully. "Most of the offers come with expectations about how Prime should be governed, what our priorities should be, how our resources should be used." Nodded thoughtfully. "So they're not actually proposing partnerships, they're proposing acquisitions." "That's a very accurate way to put it." "What would an actual partnership look like to you?" asked. The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. I suppose it would involve someone who saw value in what we already are, not just what we could become for them. Someone who understood that strength doesn't always mean conquest, that prosperity doesn't require exploitation. Someone who would be willing to learn from you, instead of just expecting you to adapt to them. "Yes," she said softly, "exactly that." They talked for hours, told her about human society, about worlds where different cultures maintain their identities while cooperating for mutual benefit. He spoke of technologies developed not for war but for exploration, of cities built to preserve rather than replace natural beauty. In return, found herself sharing her own dreams for her people, her vision of a prime that could be both strong and peaceful, both prosperous and true to its values. "You know," said as the twin moons reached their zenith, "humans have a saying, don't marry someone you can live with, marry someone you can't live without." "What does that mean?" "It means the best partnerships aren't about convenience or political advantage. They're about finding someone who makes you better than you were alone, someone who challenges you to grow while accepting who you already are." Was quiet for a long moment. "Your people choose based on such feelings." "When we're smart, yes. When we're not, we end up in marriages as empty as the political ones you've been rejecting." And you believe such feelings can exist between people who barely know each other. Smiled, I think they can grow between people who are willing to really get to know each other. But that takes time and patience and the willingness to be vulnerable with someone. Things that are impossible when every conversation is really about trade agreements and military alliances. Exactly. As the evening grew late, stood to leave. Thank you for this conversation, Your Highness. It's been enlightening. Thank you for asking questions no one else has bothered to ask, replied. Will you be staying on Prime long? A few days, if that's all right. I'd like to see more of your world, learn more about how your people live, purely for my own education, of course. Of course, she said, though she found herself hoping he would stay longer. Thane can arrange for anything you need. After left, stood alone in the chamber, looking out at her city. For the first time in years, she found herself thinking not about the burden of her position, but about the possibilities it might offer. Perhaps there were other ways to serve her people than the path she had always assumed she must take. Perhaps strength could be found not just in who you married, but in who you chose to become. The next morning brought news that would change everything. The Empire, the most aggressive military power in their sector, had begun mobilizing fleets near the border of space. For the first time, the theoretical wars her mother had always tried to prevent through marriages were becoming real. And Princess would have to decide what she was truly willing to sacrifice to protect her people. Every proposal failed. The Alien Princess Part 2. The War Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as Prime's greatest military minds argued over tactical displays. Princess listened to the familiar debates with growing frustration. Admiral wanted to surrender immediately and hope for favorable terms. General insisted they could hold defensive positions for perhaps 3 months before being overwhelmed. Minister On kept suggesting they could still arrange a marriage alliance with someone powerful enough to deter the Empire might still accept your proposal. Response, On said for the 3rd time. Prince Nexus was quite taken with you, and their fleet could demand we become a colony in exchange for protection, interrupted. We would simply trade conquest for absorption. Admiral pulled up the tactical display again. Your Highness, the numbers are clear. The battle fleet includes 12 dreadnoughts and over 200 support vessels. We have 4 defense platforms and maybe 50 ships that could engage in serious combat. Even if we fought perfectly, we would lose. Then we don't fight their kind of war, a new voice said from the chamber entrance. Everyone turned to see standing in the doorway, still wearing his simple civilian clothes among all the military uniforms. Felt a mix of relief and concern at seeing him. Mister, she said formally, this is a closed military briefing. I know, replied calmly. I asked Thane to let me observe. I think I might be able to help. General's scales darkened with irritation. No offense, human, but this is a matter for professional soldiers, not tourists. You're right, agreed easily. I'm not a soldier, I'm an engineer, and as an engineer I can tell you that your tactical thinking is completely wrong for this situation. The room erupted in angry voices, but raised a hand for silence. Something in his confidence reminded her of their conversation the night before, when he had seen solutions where she saw only problems. Explain what you mean. Moved to the tactical display, studying the fleet positions. You're trying to fight a conventional space battle against an enemy with overwhelming force. That's suicide. But you're not in space, you're defending your home system. That changes everything. How? Admiral demanded. Because space battles are about mobility and firepower, said. But system defense is about engineering and intelligence. You know every asteroid, every gas giant, every gravitational anomaly in this system. They don't. He manipulated the display, highlighting features of the system that the military officers had dismissed as irrelevant. These aren't obstacles, they're weapons you haven't learned to use yet. Elaborate, said quietly. Human military doctrine has a principle: never fight fair if you can help it. They are expecting you to meet them in open battle like honorable warriors. Instead, you make the system itself your ally. Began outlining a strategy that was unlike anything the military had ever considered. Instead of massing their fleet for a decisive engagement, he suggested spreading their ships throughout the system, using them as mobile sensor platforms and strike units. The key was the system's asteroid belt, a dense field of metallic rocks that they had always treated as a navigation hazard. You turn the belt into a minefield, explained. Not with explosives, with intelligence. You position sensors throughout the field so you know exactly where every enemy ship is at all times. Then you use small, fast ships to hit them when they're vulnerable and disappear before they can respond. Guerrilla warfare, General said with distaste. Hardly honorable. Honor is a luxury you can afford when you're winning, replied bluntly. Right now, you need to survive. Admiral studied the proposed tactical changes. Even if this strategy could work, it would require coordination and timing far beyond our current capabilities. Our ships aren't designed for this kind of warfare. Then we redesign them, said. That's what humans do best, we adapt. Over the following days, worked with engineers to modify their ships for the new strategy. Found herself spending more and more time in the engineering bays, fascinated by the way approached problems. Where thinking was elegant and traditional, human thinking was chaotic and practical. This is insane, Chief Engineer muttered as they reconfigured the power systems on a patrol cruiser. We're stripping out half the ceremonial systems to install stealth generators and enhanced sensors. The ceremonial systems won't help you if you're dead, pointed out, and stealth generators will let you survive long enough to actually fight. Watched him work, nodding how his hands moved with precise confidence, even on technology he had never seen before. How do you adapt so quickly to our systems? Engineering principles are universal, replied without looking up from the power coupling he was adjusting. Energy needs to flow, information needs to be processed, materials need to maintain structural integrity. The specific methods change, but the underlying problems are the same. Is that how you see everything, as engineering problems? Paused in his work, looking at her thoughtfully. Not everything, but most of the things people think are impossible are really just engineering problems no one has solved yet. Even political problems. Especially political problems, said with a slight smile. Take your situation, for example. Everyone assumes you have to choose between independence and security, but that's just a failure of imagination. What do you mean? You're thinking like your advisors, that you need to be either strong enough to stand alone or weak enough to need protection. But there's a third option. Which is, be valuable enough that others want to stand with you, not above you. That evening, as the fleet drew closer to the system's edge, found herself walking through the palace gardens with. The bioluminescent plants created patterns of light that shifted with their emotions, responding to their presence. These are incredible, said, watching the plants pulse with soft blues and greens. They're reading microexpressions and chemical signals, aren't they? My great-grandmother designed them, said proudly. She believed that beauty should be alive, that it should respond to those who experience it. That's a very human concept, actually. We have artists who work with living systems too, though nothing this sophisticated. They walked in comfortable silence for a while before spoke again. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why did you really come here? Not the curiosity answer, the real reason. Was quiet for a long moment. Because I heard about a princess who was brave enough to say no to an entire galaxy, and I wanted to meet someone like that. Someone like what? Someone who understood that being strong doesn't mean being alone. The plants around them shifted to warmer colors, golds and soft purples that reflected emotions neither of them was ready to name. In the distance, alert signals began to sound as the fleet crossed into space. The battle began 3 days later, and nothing went as anyone expected. They entered the system in perfect formation, their massive dreadnoughts leading a disciplined advance toward Prime. Their commander, Admiral Orr, had conquered 17 worlds using the same strategy, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. What he encountered instead was chaos. The fleet was nowhere to be seen. Long-range sensors detected scattered ships throughout the asteroid belt, but they refused to engage. When scouts moved to investigate, they found the belt itself had changed. What had been a simple navigation hazard was now a maze of sensor nets and hidden weapons platforms. This is not how civilized species wage war, Admiral Orr growled to his bridge crew as another scout ship vanished into the asteroid field. Sir, we're detecting energy signatures throughout the belt, his tactical officer reported. But we can't get clear readings on anything. Then we clear the belt, the Admiral decided. Full bombardment clear our path to the planet. But when the bombardment began, they were ready. Hidden sensors provided precise targeting data to concealed weapon platforms. Ships found themselves under attack from directions they hadn't even known were possible. Worse, every time they destroyed one platform, two more seemed to appear elsewhere in the belt. They're using the asteroids themselves as mobile platforms, the tactical officer realized. They're moving the weapons around constantly. From the command center on Prime, Princess watched the battle unfold with a mixture of hope and terror. The strategy was working, but barely. Each ship they destroyed came at enormous cost in platforms and equipment. "We can't keep this up indefinitely," Admiral reported. "We're running out of platforms faster than we can build them." "Then we move to Phase 2, said calmly. He had been granted a temporary position as tactical advisor, much to the annoyance of several career officers. "What's Phase 2? Asked. "We stop playing defense and start playing offense." What had realized, and what he had carefully not explained to the military, was that the asteroid belt strategy was never meant to win the war. It was meant to change how the war was fought. They had come prepared for a space battle, with tactics and equipment designed for fighting in open space against conventional forces. They were not prepared for what happened when 50 small ships, equipped with experimental stealth generators and guided by perfect intelligence about enemy positions, began hunting them through the asteroid field. They found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't catch. Every time they tried to form up for a conventional engagement, they melted away into the asteroid field. Every time they tried to pursue, they found themselves separated and vulnerable to attack. "This is madness," Admiral raged as he watched another dreadnought take critical damage from attackers who vanished before his gunners could even target them. "They fight without honor." But it wasn't madness, and it wasn't without honor. It was simply a different understanding of what honor meant. They were fighting not for glory or conquest, but for the survival of their people and their way of life. They were proving that strength didn't always look like what stronger empires expected. After 6 days of this impossible warfare, Admiral found himself with a choice: retreat with heavy losses, or continue a battle that was destroying his fleet piece by piece against an enemy that refused to fight fairly. He chose to retreat, but as his fleet prepared to withdraw, something unprecedented happened. Princess herself contacted him directly. "Admiral her voice came across the communication channel, calm and regal. "I would like to discuss terms." "Terms?" the Admiral sputtered. "You think you can dictate terms after this guerrilla nonsense?" "I think we can discuss mutual benefit," replied. "Your fleet is powerful, but it's not designed for this kind of warfare. You could take this system eventually, but the cost would be enormous. And what would you gain? A devastated world and a population that knows how to turn any environment against occupiers." She paused, letting that sink in. "Or you could leave with your fleet largely intact and a trade agreement that benefits both our peoples. You would offer trade to an enemy who just tried to conquer you." "You're not my enemy, Admiral. You're a professional soldier following orders from leaders who saw value in what my world offers. I'm offering you a way to return to those leaders with something more valuable than conquest, a willing partner." The terms offered were unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of tribute or submission, she proposed genuine trade agreements, technology exchanges, and mutual defense pacts. They would gain access to biotechnology and engineering expertise. They would gain the security of alliance with a powerful military force. "This is impossible," said. "Empires don't form partnerships with their intended conquests." "Then perhaps it's time for empires to evolve," suggested. The negotiation took hours, but by the end of the day, something entirely new had emerged. Not conquest, not submission, but alliance between equals. The empire gained a partner whose unique capabilities complemented their own strengths. Prime gained security without sacrificing independence. And across the galaxy, other empires began to take notice of the world that had turned a conquest into a partnership. But the greatest change was not political. It was personal, and it was happening in the quiet moments between battles, in conversations that had nothing to do with war or diplomacy, in the growing understanding between a princess who had refused to be conquered and an engineer who had shown her a different way to be strong. Every proposal failed the Alien Princess Part 3. The aftermath of the crisis transformed Prime from an isolated world into the center of something entirely new. Within months, delegations from dozens of species arrived not with conquest fleets or marriage proposals, but with genuine interest in the partnership model that had emerged from what should have been a devastating war. Princess found herself busier than ever, but it was a different kind of busy. Instead of rejecting proposals and managing the politics of appeasement, she was helping to design a new form of interstellar cooperation. The alliance of mutual benefit, as historians would later call it, grew from 5 founding members to over 30 worlds within the first year. Had stayed on as a permanent advisor, officially to help develop the alliance's technological standards and defense protocols. Unofficially, had asked him to stay because she couldn't imagine facing the challenges ahead without his perspective. Their working relationship had deepened into something neither of them had expected, but both had come to treasure. The hegemony is calling it a dangerous precedent, reported as he entered his private office with the latest diplomatic intelligence. They're concerned that other worlds might start getting ideas about independence. Looked up from the proposal she was reviewing for a joint terraforming project. Let them be concerned. Fear of change is what created the problems we're solving. True, but we need to be careful. Success makes you a target in different ways than weakness does. She gestured for him to sit in the chair across from her desk, a routine they had developed over the past months. What kind of targeting are you thinking about? Political mostly. The old empires can't let the alliance model succeed too visibly, or their own subject worlds will start asking uncomfortable questions about why they need emperors and conquered territories instead of partners and trade agreements. So we're still fighting wars, just different ones. Welcome to politics, said with a wry smile. At least these wars don't involve anyone actually shooting at each other. Yet added darkly, they worked together through the afternoon, addressing the constant stream of challenges that came with building something new. Trade disputes, technology sharing agreements, defense coordination protocols. Every aspect of interstellar cooperation had to be reimagined when the participants were equals rather than rulers and subjects. There's something else we need to discuss, said as the day wound down. The Terran Federation has been asking about formal relations with the Alliance. Paused in her review of the agricultural accords. Your government wants to join. It's complicated. Earth is interested, but humans are spread across dozens of independent colonies and confederations. We don't have a unified government the way most species do. That sounds very human, she observed with amusement. We prefer diverse to chaotic, thank you, replied. But it does create diplomatic challenges. Who speaks for humanity when humans can't agree among themselves on who should speak for us? Who speaks for you personally? The question hung in the air between them, carrying weight beyond its simple words. Had been living on Prime for 8 months, participating in decisions that would shape galactic politics for generations. But he had done so as an individual, not as a representative of any government or organization. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, said carefully. The Federation has offered me a formal position as their liaison to the Alliance. It would make everything official, give me actual authority to negotiate agreements. That sounds like good news, said, though something in her tone suggested otherwise. It would also mean I'd have to return to Earth regularly for briefings and consultations. I'd be representing Federation interests, not just offering my own perspective. Set down the document she had been holding. Would that change how you see your role here? I don't know, admitted. That's what worries me. They sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about what this meant. Over the months they had worked together, they had developed a partnership based on trust and mutual respect, offered perspectives that challenged assumptions, while provided insights into the complex realities of interstellar politics. They complemented each other in ways that went beyond professional collaboration. There's another option, said finally. You could stay as an independent advisor. The Alliance Charter allows for individual experts to hold permanent positions without representing specific governments. That would mean giving up my Federation citizenship, said, becoming, essentially, a citizen of the Alliance rather than of Earth. Is that something you would consider? Looked out the window at the city below, where architecture now incorporated design elements from dozens of allied worlds. The bioluminescent plants in the gardens had been joined by crystalline structures from the floating gardens designed by the aquatic. It was beautiful, diverse, and completely unlike anything that had existed before. "Can I ask you something?" said instead of answering directly. "Always." "Do you ever regret it? Turning down all those marriage proposals, choosing this path instead of the traditional one?" Considered the question seriously. "I regret the pain it caused my mother, who believed she was protecting me by arranging strategic marriages. I regret that some good people were hurt when I rejected alliances that might have benefited them. But I don't regret the choice itself. Even though it led to war with the war was always coming," she said firmly. "The marriage proposals were just ways to delay it, not prevent it. And this way, we found a solution that actually solved the problem instead of just postponing it." "What problem?" "The assumption that some people are meant to rule and others are meant to serve. That strength comes from dominance rather than cooperation." She looked at him directly. "That partnerships have to be about convenience rather than choice." The weight of her words settled between them, carrying implications they had been dancing around for months. Said, using her name without title for the first time, "What kind of partnership are we talking about now?" "The kind that scares me," she admitted, "because it matters too much to risk, but it also matters too much not to try." "I feel the same way," said quietly. "Then we have a problem," said with a slight smile, "because someone is going to have to be brave enough to say what we're both thinking. That we've fallen in love with someone we can't live without." "That's a good start," laughed the sound filling the room with warmth. "You know, humans have another saying, home is where the heart is." "And where is your heart?" "Right here," he said simply, "with you on this world building something that matters." The conversation that followed lasted deep into the night, covering everything from practical considerations about their different species and to philosophical questions about duty and desire. They talked about the challenges they would face from both their peoples and from the galaxy at large. They discussed the precedent they would set and the example they would provide. Most importantly, they talked about what they wanted to build together, both personally and for the alliance they had helped create. 3 months later, Princess made an announcement that surprised no one who knew her but shocked the galactic political establishment. She was marrying, but not in the traditional sense of a political alliance. Instead, they would be partners in the truest meaning of the word, co-leaders of the alliance of mutual benefit. The wedding ceremony itself reflected their values. Instead of a formal exchange of political advantages, they exchanged vows written by themselves about partnership, growth, and mutual support. Instead of representatives from major empires, the guests were scientists, engineers, artists, and ordinary citizens from across the Alliance worlds. "Do you promise," said to during the ceremony, "to challenge me when I need to grow, support me when I need strength, and stand with me as we build something neither of us could create alone?" "I do," replied. "Do you promise to accept me as I am while helping me become better than I was, to trust my judgment while teaching me to see things I would miss alone?" "I do." Keeper Thane, performing his role as efficient, smiled as he spoke the traditional words. "Then let this partnership be a symbol of what becomes possible when beings choose cooperation over conquest, growth over dominance, love over convenience." The reception that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Warriors shared drinks with artists. Engineers collaborated with human musicians to create performances that transcended species boundaries. The bioluminescent gardens responded to the emotions of hundreds of different beings, creating patterns of light that had never existed before. Admiral, or now serving as the Alliance representative, approached the newlyweds during the celebration. "Princess, Engineer," he said formally, then broke into a rare smile. "I must admit, when I came to conquer this world, I never expected to attend your wedding as a friend." "Life is full of surprises," replied warmly. "Thank you for being willing to be surprised by new possibilities." "Speaking of new possibilities," the Admiral continued, "the Defense Council has a proposal for your consideration. We would like to establish a joint training program teaching our tactical doctrine to Alliance forces while learning your adaptive strategies." "Traditional honor merging with human creativity?" asked with interest. "Traditional honor evolving with human creativity," or corrected. "There's a difference." as the evening continued, and found themselves standing together on the same balcony where she had once watched rejected suitors depart. Now, instead of ships leaving in anger or disappointment, they watched vessels from dozens of worlds arriving with trade goods, cultural exchanges, and collaborative research projects. "Do you think we'll be able to make it work?" asked, leaning against his shoulder. "All of it, the alliance, the marriage, the changes we're trying to create." "I think we'll fail at some things and succeed at others," replied honestly. "But I think we'll do both together, learning from the failures and building on the successes." "That's very human thinking. Your very wisdom." She laughed, and the sound carried across the gardens where beings from dozens of worlds were creating something new together. Not an empire built on conquest, but a community built on choice. 6 months later, the alliance of mutual benefit had grown to include over 50 worlds. The old empires watched nervously as more and more of their subject worlds asked uncomfortable questions about independence and partnership. Some tried to crush the movement through force, but discovered that alliances based on mutual benefit were much harder to break than empires based on domination. The galaxy was changing, one partnership at a time, one choice at a time, one world at a time, deciding that cooperation might be stronger than conquest after all. And at the center of it all, a princess who had refused to be conquered and an engineer who had shown her a different way to be strong continued to build something neither could have created alone. A love that had transformed from curiosity to partnership to the foundation of a new way for beings to relate to each other across the stars. The failed proposals had led to something no one had expected. A proposal that couldn't fail because it was built on understanding rather than advantage, on growth rather than acquisition, on the radical idea that the strongest partnerships were between equals who chose to stand together. In the end, every proposal had failed the alien princess until one human arrived who wasn't proposing at all. He was simply offering her the chance to propose a better future together. And that, as humans might say, made all the difference.